Hello everyone, welcome. This is the sixth chapter of Birbal Sahani, The Researcher. The same way as a child's walk is made up of a series of faults, the edifice of science is erected upon a series of mistakes. This is what is said by Birbal Sahni. The standing of Birbal Sahni as a researcher was tall, having worked with a stalwart Professor A.C. Seward, and on the strength of his research, which was known and respected internationally, he was a global authority in the circle. He was independent in thinking. Wagner's theory of confidential drift had been known for many years. He supported it with paleobotanical evidence by recovering fossils of low altitude vegetation at higher altitude. For instance, he initiated what may be termed archaeobotany. He combined archaeology and botany to study ancient civilization. He recovered charred remains of a conifer from the ancient civilization. He recovered charred remains of a conifer from the Harappan site. Considering that conifers grow at higher altitude, this established a connection between the two places. Professor Sani visited Jammu and Kashmir several times. His interest lay in Karewa sediments. By Karewa, we mean step like structures at an altitude of over approximately 800 to 1800 meters found deposited in a lake basin. At such altitudes, one doesn't expect vegetation that occur in aquatic environment. The discovery of aquatic plants was an interesting aspect of the study. The aquatic flora does not generally find the condition favorable to them at altitudes greater than about 1700 meter. The observation became important, leading to the suggestion that the lake was originally at a lower elevation but got uplifted due to some geological activity. Here, by geological activity, we mean tectonics. It is the movement of the Earth's crustal plates, their collision, and the resulting upliftment of the lighter plate and going down, that is, subduction of the heavier plate. So, initially, at a lower level, these deposits may have been afterwards raised at least by about 2000 meters. It required guts in those days to offer such an explanation. What seemed like an outlandish idea then is now globally accepted. Professor Sani also took an interest in the study of coins and other archaeological artifacts. It started by chance. He stumbled upon a collection of coin molds in Haryana while hunting for fossils and reported the research as a clay seal and sealing of Sunga period from the Kokra Kot Mount. He pursued the line of work, ensured further excavations, and then published a monograph on the techniques of coin making in ancient India. 6 years later, in the year 1941, he published another paper, Yehudia coin molds from Sonnet near Ludhiana in Satluj Valley. His work on numismatics was duly recognized by the professional experts, and he was honored with a medal by the Numismatics Society of India. Professor Sani believed in looking at a larger picture. He always felt that the more fossils you study, the clearer will be the picture. He himself studied samples not only from India but from many other countries. There were times when Professor Seward was approached for the study of Indian fossils, but he told the submitters to take them to Professor Sani instead. Whenever Professor Sani visited Europe, he collected as many samples as possible. In fact, many samples were being sectioned in Stockholm in anticipation of his visit at the time he breathed his last. He was rightly described by the famous botanist Professor T.S. Sadasivan as having a philosophy of life being attached detachment like a true Vedantin, and that duty was his main force. Professor T.G. Helle commented on Professor Sani's approach or to research. His research is, in fact, ranged over practically the whole field of paleobotany. He not only selected the concrete objects of his investigations from all major groups of vascular plants and from nearly all plant bearing geological systems, but in dealing with this diverse material and in his more general discussion, he approached the problems involved from every possible angle. Thus, his work on fossil plants resulted in contributions to all pertinent branches of paleobotany as well as to stratigraphy, paleogeography, and other related lines of geological research. Explorations was in his nature, a trait he showed even in his childhood. He carried out extensive work on fossils from places like Haryana, Himachal, Jammu and Kashmir, and Jharkhand. For this, he made long field trips to these places. The journeys in those days were not easy. Field trips involved a lot of trekking and also bullock cart rides, but Professor Sani enjoyed them. Later, he also took up studies on fossils from the Salt Range. This happened to have been his playground where he used to roam about as a child. While working on his doctorate with Professor Seward, Birbal Sani was involved in revising a textbook originally written by Lawson. Interestingly, the term included a clause that prevented the revising authors from writing another textbook of botany. All this for the paltry 20 sterling pounds he got. Given the clarity of thoughts and exceptional expression power he possessed, his writing a textbook has been a big loss to the students of botany. He conducted field trips in many parts of India. Rajmahal Hills in Jharkhand now was a place he frequented and enriched his collection. He also carried out field trips in Kareba sediments in Jammu and Kashmir. He explored sites in Himachal and Uttaranchal also. Interestingly, he studied a large number of fossils which were not picked up from the fields but from museums. So, some friends even termed him truly a fossil hunter. This allowed him to have a comprehensive view of vegetation around the world, and he was able to look at evolution of plants in a much broader way. Facilities in those days were merged, and so were funds for research. It was as late as 1932, that is, after over a decade after his joining the University of Lucknow, he got a funding of rupees 4,000 for a fossil cutting machine. But Professor Sani will was too strong to be cursed by the difficulties. He continued his work relentlessly in the face of all odds and earned such a high reputation that if European paleobotanists were approached by any Indian scientist to help in the study of plant fossils, they would direct them to contact Professor Sani. He developed a practice of visualizing and reconstructing the model of a plant based on several different parts of the same plant recovered as fossil rather than just as on one part. So, too much dependence on just one feature in the anatomy was given up. He built up a reputation so that people all over the world would send him samples for study. The sites for fossils were generally remote places. Even today, most are. And one had to travel by bullock carts and track and walk a lot. It was not an easy job. Professor Sani was of the view that nothing which is useful for research is too small and one shouldn't be ashamed of doing that work oneself. He applied the same yardstick to himself and learnt everything required for fossil studies, be it going to the field, unearthing the fossils, carrying them back, breaking, cutting, grinding, polishing, or photographing. Professor Sani would painstakingly cut the rock using a wire bow and then proceed to make sections. It was not easy. Fossils are found in sedimentary rocks. The sedimentary rocks are formed by compaction of sedimentary materials under the effect of high temperature and high pressure common at depths. These rocks are generally more fragile than igneous rocks formed from the cooling of lava. But the fossils themselves can be very hard. For instance, the fossils may be in the form of a petrified wood or chert, which is almost pure silica. As mentioned earlier, he had worked to make the foundation stone of the institute. Professor Hartog was distinguished chemist. He was a member of the Viceroy Commission on the University of Calcutta, India in 1917. From 1920 to 1925, Hartog served as the first Vice Chancellor of the University of Dhaka, Bengal. He was instrumental in the creation of National Foundation for Education Research, London, to study the nature and purpose of school examination. He played a leading role in the improvement of school and college examination. In 1930, Hartog was knighted for distinguished public service. Professor Hartog had heard about Professor Sani, so when he visited India, he wished to see the place where Professor Sani worked. He was taken to the museum where Professor Sani's table was placed. He looked bewildered. Professor Sani had his table placed in a corner which was just a partition part of the museum. Professor Sani has no room of his own, he uttered in disbelief. Then he accepted in muttering, yes, great scientists have always worked in garrets. This goes to show that those who focus on work hardly worry about comfort and pomp. Thank you.